Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our second webinar in our longest day webinar series today. We're so excited as Synergy Home Care to be a part of the longest day, as well as a proud national team member for the Walk to End Alzheimer's. So we are very excited about participating in this event today and really being able to offer a day of education and support and resources for all of those who are personally managing and dealing with someone living with Alzheimer's, as well as those who are professionals in the community who are supporting families and clients who are living with Alzheimer's and dementia. This session is on community resources from A to Z, so it's really going to be all about how to assess and understand the resources that are available to those who are living with, again, Alzheimer's and dementia, as well as those who may be dealing with other progressive or chronic illnesses. My name is Carla Sutter. I am the Director of Operations for Synergy Home Care, and we are a national home care agency that provides support and services to families whose lives have been impacted from age or illness. I am a clinical social worker and have worked with families and clients throughout the nation for over the past 25 years. So I'm excited to be able to share the information that I have gathered during my time as a social worker. This is really going to be navigating the maze of caring for an older adult. Again, the focus today is with Alzheimer's, but so many are caring for individuals who have found this webinar series who may be dealing with other diagnoses. And while this is more geared towards older adults, certainly we know that there are many who are dealing with early stages of Alzheimer's and dementia, and many of the things that I'm going to share today will be as appropriate for those families. I'd like to start probably almost all of my sessions, and for those who were on the original first session of the day, Finding Hope as a Care Partner, they saw the same slide. But I think it's so important as we are dealing with any part of our life, whether it's raising children, working in a stressful environment, and certainly caring for individuals who are dealing with chronic, progressive, and acute illnesses. To remember this one slide, we as humans beings like to be in control, but the reality is there are very few things that we can control. There certainly are things we can influence and many things that we cannot control. But I think the key to being able to find a balance in our life is knowing within which category do we need to be putting our resources, our time, our energy, our finances. And what I find often with caregivers for family members is that we often are trying so hard to control the situation that our stress is rising because, again, that's not something we can do. My hope after we finish today's session is that you will have more of a sense of mastery over those things you can influence and the resources and supports that are available to you that you'll be able to find. You know, a few years ago, probably 10 or 15 years ago, if you lined up a group of 65-year-olds in a room or 70-year-olds in a room, you'd pretty much be able to identify them as 65 or 70. Very similar to certainly if you bring a group of preschoolers together or a kindergarten class, you're pretty much going to be able to identify them as 6 years old. Their size is pretty similar, their behaviors are often very similar, their attitudes are similar. But what we found over time is that there is such a diversity now of age and ability that there is no longer what is a 70-year-old and what is someone living with a chronic or progressive illness supposed to be like. And even with those who are living with Alzheimer's and dementia, we find that if we meet one person living with Alzheimer's and dementia, we have done just that. We have met one person living with that disease, because so much of what occurs is not just about the disease itself, but what environment they're in, the supports they're getting, who they've been throughout their lifetime, the resources that they bring as a person, and who their core has been. So it's really important that the information that I share today is really unique to each particular situation, and that each time we're faced with providing this support and care, we really have to, again, look at it with new, fresh eyes, and what supports and resources work best for the person that we are considering. So where do we begin? The most important thing, I think, is understanding the goals of all involved. I think one of the reasons that many families face difficulties as they begin to assess what a situation requires is that we all come at it from very different points. Our goal often is the same. We want the best for a loved one. We want the best for a parent or a spouse or a sibling. But how we're going to get to that is often very different. And what I find is that sometimes if we don't first ask that person and they aren't able to communicate in whatever way they can what some of their goals are, then we often are going to have a much more difficult time in being able to set up services, to be able to have somebody accept the services that we're providing. And this came very clear to me when many years ago, I had a family who asked me to come into their home of their father and mother because they wanted to get services set up for their dad, who was being, in their eyes, very stubborn and wouldn't accept services. And so they asked if I would come in and convince him that he needed some supports from the community. And so I absolutely said that I would come in, and I met with all of them, and I asked the gentleman, who was probably in his late 70s, early 80s, what his goal was, very simply at the beginning after I said who I was. And he was very clear with his goals. He wanted to stay at home. He wanted to continue to be there for his wife, who had advancing Alzheimer's. And those were really two of his key goals, staying in his own home and being the primary care supporter for his wife. He didn't necessarily say caregiver, but the care supporter for his wife. And I asked him a few of the things that he was doing around the house at the present time. I knew this because I had the conversation with his kids. And the things that they were most concerned about were the things that he talked about doing. He would go down the rickety old stairs into their basement, really a cellar, to do the laundry. He would go outside, and this was in Minnesota, so there was lots of tasks to do out in the yard, both in the fall with raking leaves and certainly in the winter with shoveling snow and chopping up ice. And I asked him how any of those tasks that he had shared with me brought him closer to his goal, which I repeated again in his own words, which was to remain in his own home and provide care for his wife. And he thought for a moment, and he then said, I guess it really doesn't. And he himself then shared, I've had a few kind of slips where I could have fallen on the ice, and had I hurt myself and needed to go into the hospital or broken something, my wife can't stay by herself. My kids don't live close enough to get here, and they can't leave their jobs to provide the same level of support that I do. We probably would end up in a nursing home. And by asking him his own goals and listening to what he was doing and allowing his words to guide the conversation, he was able to say, after I asked would he accept some support for the things that he had talked about, and he agreed, he was able to come to that on his own. The kids, who kind of sat there in awe and thinking that I had done something magical, what they didn't realize is that by asking his goals and coming back to him, he saw it as something that he was doing for himself or his wife. When the kids told him what they wanted him to do, which was the exact same things that I was bringing up to him, they heard that he was ineffectual, he was frail, he was old, and they were going to take over. That certainly wasn't their goal, but because of the way they had approached it, because they had shared their concerns and their fears with him and really put it in their own words and not in his, that's how he experienced it. So understanding goals of all involved is so key. It's really all about the approach and the intent as we begin to understand what somebody's needs are and then what supports are available. The other thing is that we should never ask others to do something we would not complete ourselves. And this is particularly true when it comes to paperwork. And as we move through here, and we'll talk about some of the paperwork, but for instance, if you're wanting to complete a will or an estate plan for your parents, and you don't have one yourself, I think it's really key to be able to do that as a joint act and share that this is something you believe in. It's something you believe in so much that you're going to be doing it at the same time, and this isn't just about someone needing it because they're getting older. The other thing is that it's really key that we always respond honestly, even if it's not the easy thing to do. And I think it's very easy to be able to say, Mom, I'll never put you into a nursing home. You'll always be able to stay at home. But that's not realistic. It may not be realistic because her diagnosis, her symptoms can't maybe be as well managed in that setting for a period of time. Maybe she needs more of a skilled service. But the bottom line is we always should be sharing that it will be our goal to keep them at the place and with the way that they would like to be able to be cared for, unless it is not in their best interest. The other piece is, as we're having these conversations, is sometimes to take it out of the personal, not to go into the conversation with your parent or your spouse even to say, I think we need to do X, Y, Z, or you need to do X, Y, Z, but to really say, I was talking with someone at work, or a friend called me and they shared that, their parents are starting to need some assistance, and they began to look at XYZ services, and then say, what do you think? Is that something you've ever thought about? Taking it out of the personal allows people not to be as defensive and to actually listen about what they're going to do versus defending what they think you wanting them to do. The other piece, which is very important, is always be aware of the memory issues that someone may have, the hearing and vision concerns as we're having these conversations, as we're starting to assess the needs. We definitely want the conversation to be at a level that they can comprehend, that they can be able to engage in, that's not too overwhelming, and that they're absolutely able to hear the conversation, that they're not straining, and at the same time their focus is so much on trying to hear that they're not able to listen. And absolutely for those with any vision impairments, that any of the information we're sharing about resources is provided to them in a way that they have access to it, they can see it or hear about it in a way that they truly have all the information they need to make decisions. So if we're going to start with the A from our A to Z, it's important as we're assessing to understand what we need to assess in somebody's life as their needs. Some of you may have already heard this term, and others, if you're just beginning your journey of senior care or services, you'll probably hear this, and that is something called activities of daily living. When you're talking with healthcare professionals, they sometimes forget and they use the acronym ADLs without really giving an explanation. So now you're going to have that knowledge of what ADLs are. So activities of daily living are really those things such as bathing, dressing, grooming, shaving, doing your hair, eating, the ability to, eat and swallow, so more of the physical task of eating, toileting in any means that is, transferring, that is getting up from a chair to a standing position, from a standing position into bed, so transferring from one locale to another, and then walking. Now, mobility may be that somebody has for many years been in a wheelchair, so we're going to assess how they're doing today from where they used to be in how they manage their wheelchair versus, taking any points away, so to speak, because they have been in a wheelchair for many years. It's more, what are they doing that's different today than they were able to do a week ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. So as you're thinking about assessing the situation that you're in, you always want to kind of look at where was this person, where were we in our lifestyle, and what has changed that has impacted the ability to do any of these tasks. The other thing we want to assess is something that's called instrumental activities of daily living. Again, many professionals will throw out the acronym IADLs. And if you're ever in a situation when you're with a healthcare provider who is using acronyms or terms that you're not familiar with, please ask them. Oftentimes they may not even realize that that's what they're doing. At the end of today's 4 sessions, and that will be the 4:30 Eastern Time session, I'm going to be doing one called Beyond the Clinic Doors, and that's all about advocating for ourselves in the healthcare realm, and I'll be talking about communication. But instrumental activities of daily living are those things that we just take a part of every day that kind of allows our lives to run. Money management, writing checks, paying bills, shopping and running errands, transportation, how do we access and get to different places, meal preparation, both the purchasing and the preparation of food, equipment use, what are the things we're needing to use around the home, social participation, medication management, how are we managing our prescriptions, and that's a big one for many seniors, particularly who the average senior may be taking up to 16 medications throughout the day, even if that's several same meds but several times a day, and then coordinating their health care. So those are all the things that, again, someone may be very good at the physical tasks but may really be struggling with the IADLs because of cognitive decline or memory loss. One of the things, as I want to go back to the ADLs and IADLs, is it's important, again, to not only think of many people, particularly when they do have cognitive changes due to dementia or Alzheimer's, are physically able to do tasks for quite a while. However, they can't plan for them or put the steps together in a safe way. So while they may physically be able to bathe, they may be flexible enough to be able to reach around and clean themselves, they may not be able to know when they should be bathing, how often throughout the week, that the hot water should not be the only faucet that's turned on. They may do that at 1 in the morning versus during the day. They may not be able to remember that they need to wait for somebody. So again, as you're looking at the assessment of these tasks, don't just think about what can this person physically do, but how are they able to put a schedule of these together, and how are they able to go from step to step. Again, also thinking about how have they managed this throughout their lifetime. Were they able to be good money managers years ago when they had all of their faculties, when they maybe weren't dealing with frailties? And if they weren't, that doesn't mean then that that's the piece. We need to certainly help them manage it now, but that's not where their biggest deficit is, because that's always been an issue for them. So it's, again, really looking at where someone's been and where are we going. There are several things that we need to do also around home safety and looking at the environment. It's very key that many people lose their independence, not because of their physical kind of capabilities, but because they don't have their home set up in a way that is the safest, and that is what actually leads to a diminishing accident. So we need to kind of look at home safety and equipment use. Now, first of all, we have to combat objections, because so many people don't want to have their home looking like a hospital room, which is absolutely understandable. But this is also where we go back to those goals. Mom, Dad, you shared that your main goal is to stay at the home. The concern is that if you don't begin to use your walker when it's time to stand up from your chair, that you risk falling. And as you said, you don't want to have to move into a facility. But if you fall and break a hip or break something, there's very likelihood that you will spend at least a period of time in that facility. Which would you rather do? Have to be out of your home or use the walker while you're in the house? Oftentimes when we put things in those kinds of ways, people tend to make a choice that is the smarter, safer choice. versus just saying, well, you just need to do it. The doctor said just do it. But go back to what their goals were, use their words, and that way it's harder to, again, combat their own words. So thinking about objections, it's not enough, and unfortunately what happens is physicians will ask, or the hospital will ask, well, do you have a commode, which is the toilet riser? Do you have a walker? And people will often say, oh, yes. They just don't admit that it's in 12 different pieces in the garage exactly the way it was delivered from the durable medical equipment company. So it's really important to kind of follow through on those questions. Very simple things to do with lighting. As we age, our eyesight changes, so it's really important to make sure that our lighting is keeping up with our needs. Very important to have motion censored lights so that we're not having to kind of find a light switch, but the minute we walk into a room, the lights turn on, and that can be as simple as buying something that can screw into the light socket first, and then you screw the light bulb in, and now you automatically have a auto-adjusting light. Having small little night lights around so that as people wake up in the middle of the night, again, many older adults need to get up during the night. They're a little bit more confused, as we all are in the middle of the night. Their eyesight takes longer to adjust, and so having some night lights gives just some soft light that won't impact them going to sleep, but will make it easier when they do open their eyes that they're not blinded by turning on the overhead light. I have always been what I like to think of as the scatter rug queen. It is my number one thing that I always look for when I go into a client's home to make adjustments with. And they are probably one of the highest risk items in a home. These are the rugs in front of the sink, the rugs in front of a door, the rugs in between door frames, etc. Very simple to know if it's a danger. One of the easiest ways is you put your foot on, you do a little twist of your foot, and if the rug moves with you, then it's going to be a much bigger hazard. There are different things you can do. The number one that I suggest is lift up the scatter rug and put it away. But if that's not going to fly with the individual who owns it, you can use very heavy-duty two-sided tape that you can get at any Home Depot or hardware store, or a rug kind of liner that will keep it kind of more stuck to the ground. Again, people often have different goals in mind. I went into one home where the individual had literally 30 scatter rugs. It was I called it a choo-choo train of scatter rugs from their front door throughout their home. And the husband was living with Parkinson's, so had some symptoms that included shuffling of his feet. So very easy to get his feet caught along these 30 different scatter rugs that were lining the house. And when I asked the wife what her reason for all these scatter rugs were, it turned out that she had always wanted white carpet. She had waited until her kids and grandchildren were not of the age of grape juice any longer, and so she had white carpet and she was going to keep it white. We talked very clearly about what the risks were, but instead of just saying, let's pick up the scatter rugs, because I knew that her number one goal was keeping this carpet clean, I had to give her something in return to do as an alternative, and that was to find a clear runner that would, grip into the carpet. And so, again, if you're asking someone to do something and taking something away, always make sure that you're giving them a resource to replace it with. It may be different, but it needs to be doing the same functionality. Rearranging rooms so that it is clear of clutter and make it easier. Checking the fridge is really key. As we get older, we have a difficult time with sight often, and smell and taste, and so we may not even recognize that the milk is outdated by seeing the date, but we may not recognize it by smelling it or tasting it, and we risk bacteria and other kind of stomach flu issues. And then making sure if someone is going outside, particularly without assistance, that the outside grounds are clear, there's no buckles and things like that. There are so many resources available today in the marketplace to really allow individuals who are living with any type of diagnosis to be able to have the lifestyle that they want for as long as they want. And it is then on us as both the professionals as well as family and supports to be able to understand what these are and be able to begin to put a plan together for their loved one. Probably one of the original programs was Meals on Wheels that was available out in communities for many, many years. And these have really been shifted and changed to really accommodate how individuals eat nowadays. So Meals on Wheels, which are often community-based, run through a variety of either faith programs or social service or different types of programs in the community, adult programs, which can bring in a meal, once a day. It's not only for the meal, but it's also for oftentimes a safety check, because if the individual doesn't answer the door, then their contacts, their emergency contacts are notified. So it's a great kind of backup system. But if meals is a big issue and Meals on Wheels does not meet the kind of dietary needs or the wants of a individual, there are so many programs now that can deliver meals from a community, both Seattle Suttons, to name one, as well as many programs that can be sent through the mail in different ways and packaged in different ways that can be available for replacement meals, 3 meals a day. So having a meal and finding a way to ensure good nutrition is a much easier piece today. Then we have to look at the companionship that goes along with meals, and oftentimes people who are not eating well is less about the meal and more about that it is a lonely time, and that having a meal is so much about camaraderie and conversation and social aspect that there may be other ways that we can incorporate that by bringing in a caregiver into the home during those meal times, by having people go out and do at least a meal at a social program or an adult day program. We talked about medical equipment or durable medical equipment a moment ago in terms of making the home safer, and there's many different programs out there where you can get durable medical equipment. Some is covered under your health insurance, Medicare, or supplement program. Many is private pay, depending on how it is utilized. But there's also many programs that will rent it, as well as, you can find it on Craigslist or Goodwill. Many people are donating it. So it's not something that has to be a high expense with just a little bit of extra work. Goodwill Easter Seals, many programs through many of the state and communities do have a rental program where equipment can be rented for a period of time at no cost. So absolutely, if there's a concern about pricing, don't let that be your obstacle to getting and finding out about the resources. Lifeline and other technologies are really becoming much more popular in terms of all that it offers. Lifeline is a name of one particular personal emergency system. This would be the I've fallen and I can't get up type of button. But these have really expanded. Lifeline, for instance, like many of the other ones, have a program where it is a fall detection, so that if someone were to fall and they themselves can't push the button because they cognitively may not understand what that button is for, or they have hit their head, they are unconscious, the button itself, the system itself, will alert the emergency programmer and the operator that a fall has occurred. The system and the technology can actually detect a fall versus someone just laying down in bed. There's many other technologies, WanderGuard systems, ways to program things in the home so you can actually understand from a computer how many times someone has opened a refrigerator throughout the day, how many times they flushed the toilet. Why is that important? Because if you're concerned about someone's nutrition and in 2 days they have not opened the refrigerator once, then we can pretty well know that they're not eating. If someone typically uses the restroom 3 times a day, 4 times a day, and now all of a sudden they're not using it at all, we may have a concern that that person has fallen or is not capable of getting up on their own. Or if it's more than that, maybe they have a urinary infection and now they're going constantly. So it's indicating something. So these technology programs all will allow us to kind of understand and safely manage what's happening in a home, even if we're not right there. Transportation is probably one of the biggest concerns for seniors. Certainly, giving up one's license is probably one of the most difficult conversations we can have with a senior. Very important to do so in terms of safety, but very difficult to give up. The piece that, most of us have understood what the freedom of wheels are, even if those were big wheels or our tricycle back when we were 3, but what it meant to be able to have that freedom of leaving our home and going along the sidewalk to our next door neighbor. And 50, 60, 70 years later, when we are asking someone to give up that sense of freedom, it's a very big thing. So we have to make sure that we have resources in place to be able to offer them so that they don't feel that their life is now going to be muted based on their inability to get out. So there are private transportation services, there are medical transport services, certainly now with Uber and Lyft and those kind of programs, there's many different options. It's a wonderful holiday gift or a birthday gift to give somebody who has so much other things and is trying to downsize, to give them a gift card or to make a kind of a program with one of those services or a cab where they just have to call and it's already prepaid. In addition, many home care agencies, such as Synergy HomeCare, will provide not only the caregiver to accompany somebody, but also the ability for that caregiver to drive either their own car or the car of the senior, so that they have access not only to being out in the community, but then also the safety of having someone help with the transition from the car to whatever location they're going to, whether it's a social activity or a medical appointment. Adult daycare programs are really kind of social environments that have supports and are designed to really participate in social activities that are geared towards somebody's capabilities. So many of these may be for individuals with mild to moderate dementia. The programming is done in such a way to, one, keep them socially engaged, keep them in a social environment, kind of give them a lot of activities so they're tired in the evening, have them there during the day when maybe a care support member of the family is not available. Some of these you can actually have a shower at them, etc. It's a good program, but you have to think about how people have lived their life. I worked with a client once that we were looking at all different resources for them, and I initially was thinking, this person would be great at an adult daycare program, until I actually started asking about what they've always enjoyed socially, what kind of filled them up in a social, emotional way. And I learned from the family that this was somebody who did not like to do outside activities with people other than the immediate family. She was very much an introvert. She was not kind of filled up emotionally or energy-wise by being out in social activities. It actually brought on some social anxiety. So for her, bringing someone into the home versus having her go out into the community with a larger setting was just a much better situation. So it's really important to understand, again, what that person's life has been like, because typically someone who's very again, socially anxious is not going to all of a sudden want to be able to do activities out with a big group. I once had a daughter who wanted me to convince her mom to participate in all the bingo activities at the assisted living facility and all of the music activities. And I said, so your mom sounds like she's always really loved being out and engaged in all those kind of games. And she said, no, my mom never did any of that. She hated all of those type of things. Well, this was not the time then to all of a sudden try to get her mom who has managed many other symptoms to now start doing all these activities she had never done for her whole life. Care management is a program to be able to hire someone who can really help navigate through the maze of resources as an independent kind of voice who has a strong professional understanding of what the resources are and can look at a situation from both the social, emotional, physical, and financial realm, look at both the short-term needs and the longer-term needs, and make recommendations for services. Home care agencies such as Synergy HomeCare are going to be non-medical programs whose real goal is to, as we do with our programs, is to really look at how we can enhance the lives of those individuals on their best days and how to support them physically, emotionally, socially on those days where they are struggling most. And that often is going to be through a caregiver who would be coming in for short hours throughout the week, or for long live-in hours where they're there 24 hours a day because of the needs of that individual to not be able to plan for what they need when they need it, and so really needing somebody to be directing that and also providing the actual service for them. Home health services are going to be those that are covered under Medicare typically, or another health insurance. These are going to be short-term in nature. They're going to be intermittent visits. So typically someone may be coming out of the hospital after a hip fracture, and you're going to have them at home with a physical therapist coming in, several days a week, a nurse to come in once or twice a week just to do a check. These are going to be visits that will last, typically 45 minutes to an hour, not daily, and not assisting with the what we talked about under those ADLs and IADLs. So home health, unlike home care, will not be assisting with bathing, dressing, grooming, transferring, all of those things. It won't be helping people make meals or going out on social activities. That's where the home care agencies fit in. Hospice is a program for those who have advanced illnesses that they have chosen or are unable to continue to treat, and that there is an expectation of a limited life expectancy. Hospice is covered under insurances, and individuals will come in again throughout the week, but will not be there for long hours of care. And so oftentimes you'll have people who are living with a hospice program and utilizing the benefit of a home care agency at the same time. So there's a lot of partnering with and between these different resources. I always like to say that we are, we're good dance partners with each other because we really understand who takes the lead, which of the agencies takes the lead, and which of the agencies kind of work within, and understanding each other's roles and expectations, and then being able to manage and work together for the benefit of our clients. Within all of the resources, there is also senior housing, independent senior housing, which is going to just be, an apartment complex where there's going to be a similar age and activities offered, assisted living, where there's going to be staff available around the clock, and then you would be purchasing additional care services as needed. Meals would be provided at least for one or two of those meals. A continuing care retirement program is going to have all of those levels of care. There's often a buy-in where you're putting down a very large down payment and then paying a monthly rent, but as your needs change, you can move from different parts of the facility to another. Long-term care facilities, again, are going to be more of the nursing home, and no longer do we see individuals living in nursing homes long-term. I can think about my great-grandparents who, lived in a nursing home for 10 years or more, but we don't see that anymore. Long-term care is really utilized much more now as rehabilitation or for a very short acute period of time. It's really an extension of the hospital system. There also are residential homes, which are going to be smaller settings geared to one particular type of diagnosis often or age, Many of these residential homes may have 10 or so individuals, so they're wonderful kind of home settings, again, better for those clients who like a close home environment, have no problem kind of doing a lot of shared activities, shared meals, don't need a lot of individual space. And there's also residential homes that focus on hospice as well. It's important as you look at the resources available to you to understand the financing options. The reality is that most long-term care services are going to be paid for privately. It is the reality of how our healthcare system works in this country, and so private pay is going to be the lead for the majority of services, particularly those that are for long hours of care and for longer periods of time. Private pay may mean that it's being paid out of the seniors' money, or oftentimes I see families who recognize that they can't provide that care themselves, but as a team of family members will all kind of put in the money that they can to support the services for the family member. Medicare, as most of us are aware, Medicare is the federal program that we pay into with all of our paychecks, and then we can receive it depending on when you were born, starting at age 65, and some of us will not be receiving Medicare until many years after that. And this is something that typically you're going to have a supplemental plan along with it to support some of the things that Medicare won't pay full amount for, and the supplement will pick up the rest. Medicare is covering the majority of hospital visits, many doctor's visits, again, maybe with a copay along with it. Medicare services, again, do not cover what they consider custodial care. Those are going to be those services that are needed on a daily basis or an hourly basis for longer periods of time, really just assisting someone with the daily activities of life versus a skilled provider coming in to just manage and help with symptom management and assessment for a short period of time. Medical assistance, sometimes known as Medicaid as well, depending on the state that you are listening in, is going to be a state and federal program for those who have low income and assets, and that would be something you would apply for through your the county program. And again, it will be based on the assets somebody has and the income somebody has, and that will then they will determine what level of service you're able to get and help guide what is going to be covered. Reverse mortgages I won't go into a lot, but that is an option for some that may work out. Before looking at a reverse mortgage, you should always work with somebody to do a kind of assessment to get information about it, and then look at working with a company that is all they do and specialize in, because there's very many different aspects to it, and it is not the right fit for all. Long-term care insurance is something that would need to be purchased prior to any diagnosis and need. So this is something that most people would purchase back in their 50s or early 60s when they're still healthy, and then it would provide a daily benefit when a need arises based on how you're managing your activities of daily living. For those who have been in and served in the war or veterans services, you may have some VA benefits due to a service-connected disability, or you may have some benefits available to you based on your income and assets and whether you served in wartime, and that is called aid and attendance, and you can go to the va.gov website and find information on that. It's important that as we assess the needs, that we're not just looking at the physical needs of an individual and the care needs, but how have we done planning for both the financial and decision-making needs of a client. And again, this is where it's so key to be doing this prior to any issue, because you need to have the capability of signing a document, of understanding what you're signing, and understanding any benefits and burdens of medical treatment if you're completing what is called a living will or a healthcare directive. A living will or a healthcare directive is a document that guides those who are reading that document as to what type of intervention and medical treatment someone would want or would not want. Oftentimes, this will focus around someone's decision around CPR, intubation and ventilation, use of hydration and feeding tubes, where somebody wants to have care provided, etc. It's a gift to give your family to be able to both verbalize and document what those wishes are. You can appoint somebody to be your voice when they are no longer able to communicate, and that would be as a healthcare agent or medical power of attorney. But the person completing that form does need to have capacity, does need to understand who and what they are doing, and who they are assigning as that role. That person is not able to or would not be in charge of somebody's medical decision making until that person is unable to make those decisions or has elected to have that person make them at that time for them. For many people, particularly if they have chosen that they would not wish to have resuscitation in the event that their heart stops, they will want to have a separate form that is called either a pre-hospitalization form or a post form, and that would be what is utilized in the community if a EMT or first responder, like the fire department, police come out and somebody was in need of CPR. That would be the only form in the community that would allow the first responders to not initiate CPR. And that's something that you can speak to your physician's office, as well as the non-medical, the non-emergency number for your local fire department could also probably assist you with that. The durable financial power of attorney is another form, and that would be giving somebody access to completing bank assignments, real estate, all of that. That is a very powerful form because the minute it is signed, it is able to be utilized, and so it's something that should be worked out with an attorney to be able to talk about your specific situation. A will is going to be, again, those things that are titled property. It tells people what is going to happen to that titled property after one's death, and would assign somebody to be making the decisions based on what the will speaks to. A conservator and guardian is a court-appointed situation and happens typically only if no other documents have been completed and there is disagreement within the family as to what's going to happen, or the senior or individual is making unsafe decisions but has not been deemed at that point incompetent and without capacity. And so oftentimes you would need to, at that point, go into the court system with, there is fees involved, to have the court declare that someone is unable to make either financial and or medical decisions for themselves, and somebody would be appointed to do that. So as we move towards the zenith, we needed to complete the A to Z. This really is, again, all of you on this call today have taken the first steps in terms of your journey to understanding and navigating the maze of senior resources. And you're doing so by just first understanding what is available. It's really key if you are feeling like you do have a little bit of time to be able to do some planning, to be able to start going to seminars in the community when you see them. Start keeping a file of articles or resources that you find. If you see a resource out in the community, cut it out. If you see an ad that seems interesting, cut it out so that at the time that you do need assistance, somebody, you have a kind of a file already developed. If you're caring for someone long distance, it's really key to put in a few kind of safeguards. You're always going to want to know the type of car, the license plate of a car that your parents drive. If you're unable to reach them on the phone and you're concerned that something's happened to them, you'll want to be able to have that information to share with the law enforcement. You would want to have a current photo of your parents. Again, if they were to wander or get lost in any way, you're going to want to have a current photo, very similar to what we do with children. Just, keep a little photo of them. And it's nice to have that anyway. I think oftentimes as we get older, we take less and less pictures, and we don't have that remembrance to begin with. The other piece is to always, if you have a neighbor of a parent, make sure they have your phone number and contact information, so if they have any concern, they can contact you. Somebody locally should have a key or access to your parents' home, so that if there is a concern and you can't get there quick enough, that you're able to get somebody over there to be able to check on them. We want you to be able to continue learning about senior care by going to our website at synergyhomecare.com, and there you're able to download a free copy of a book called Where Do We Begin? A Guide to Elder Caregiving, and this is a comprehensive book on many of the things we've talked about today in terms of things to assess. There is an assessment tool there that will allow you to kind of go through the areas and needs that you may be seeing in your family members, and then it will kind of direct you to the type of services you may want to be exploring. It gives a glossary, so for all those terms that you may not be familiar with and healthcare providers are starting to throw out, you'll be able to understand exactly what they're speaking to. It's also a great home safety checklist that you can use, and that is complimentary if you go to, again, synergyhomecare.com, where we also have many different resources that are available to you, as well as being able to send an email if you have additional questions, either through just going to the synergyhomecare.com page or at carlasutter@synergyhomecare.com. I do see that there is a question that someone has posted. The POST form, and POST stands for Provider Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment, is a form that's available not in every state. Not every state has a POST form, but every state does have a resuscitation guideline that would be utilized in the home. But yes, you could contact the doctor's office. You can go online to post.org, and they will also connect you to the resource in your state if there is a program that is developed at that time. And again, you can also contact synergyhomecare.com, and we can help find a resource for you through one of our local offices to be able to help direct you. Again, so if you do have additional questions, please feel free to contact us at synergyhomecare.com. Also, together we will make a difference with ending Alzheimer's. We are going to be throughout the country. Our offices will be walking in all of the different walks that are happening over the next several months. If you would like to make a donation to the Walk to End Alzheimer's, you can absolutely go to the Alzheimer's page, or you can also go to our Facebook for Synergy Home Care at Facebook, and there is a place there to be able to access a link for donations to the Alzheimer's Walk to End Alzheimer's. Thank you so much for attending today. Our next session is going to be starting at 3 o'clock Eastern, and that is going to be talking about the different stages of Alzheimer's and dementia, and how we can set up different things in our home and resources and when to kind of initiate different services based on the different stages of Alzheimer's and dementia. And then at 4:30 Eastern, the last session of the day is, again, advocating for yourself in the healthcare realm. Thank you again, and please don't hesitate to contact us if there's any questions. Bye-bye.